Hi everyone. I have a question for you. If your child died at the hands of a medical error, what would you do? How would you feel? I can tell you that my eldest child had a reaction to his first MMR that put him in an ambulance after he had had a febrile seizure and quit breathing on me. I should preface this with I was not anything medical at the time. I was an interior designer and I moved him not knowing he was having a seizure. So that's probably the real issue. Anyway, I had to do CPR on my baby. Because of that whole situation, I do an altered vaccine schedule. And with my second son, he received an expired vaccine, which nulls anything in the registry that he had had it. I was furious, absolutely furious. My doctor knows that with vaccines, I'm very particular. And the nurse that called me to tell me the next day, you could tell she was so nervous. When I think back on it, my child did not die. He's totally fine and naughty. Yet I feel foolish for reacting the way I did when I think about Sue and what she had to go through. My takeaway from Chasing Zero is that there is always a silver lining. It doesn't ease the pain, it doesn't erase the mistake, but it can give you purpose. You can make a change and it doesn't have to be loud and pretentious. It can be whispered and unimposing. This certainly doesn't take away from the need for activists like Dennis Quaid and the others in the video. Those voices are absolutely necessary. But what I took from it is that on my level, I can make a quiet change to Chase Zero. One lasting impression that I had from the video was when they discussed hospitals' ideation of where they stood as far as errors go. It was blown away that some hospitals thought they were no less than average in errors, yet they were at the bottom of the pool. It made me think about my facility. We recently, very sadly, lost our magnet status because of a board change who don't believe in what magnet stands for. I just want to know, what do they think about errors? And do they even understand what an error can mean beyond the fiscal responsibility? Do they understand the emotional challenges nurses face every day when they're requiring us to constantly cut costs? Do they understand the emotional challenges that nurses face when there is an error? Or do they just look at it as, well, this nurse made an error? Anyway, I digress. My point is that I truly wonder where my facility thinks they stand in error rates, and do they understand the impact it can have? Do they even think that zero is a possibility? Or are they just trying to improve on the existing number? As far as preventable errors, we seem to have had a string of them lately on my unit. I work in NICU. I started there right out of my ADN school, and it's all I know. Most of our preventable errors are due to understaffing, which I wish they would have mentioned in the video because the impact is so intrusive in patient care. There's no reason that, like in my situation, I'm having to care for 2 babies on an oscillator. An oscillator should be a 2-to-1 deal. Those kids are sick. Anyway, one error that happened to me just 2 weeks ago was I was hanging TPN on a 29 and 4-week gestation baby. He was 2 days old and he was small for gestational age, which is important for volume purposes. I came on and the previous shift hadn't had time to hang the TPN, so I said I would do it because the unit had calmed down and it was fine. I didn't mind. The nurse going off was exhausted. I was just coming on what I thought fresh, freshly ready to go. But things did not play out that way. I did my checks on the TPN like we're supposed to. We have a paper checklist. And I did all that. As I was priming the line and scanning the patient, I got a call that I needed to attend a meconium delivery. So I had to stop what I was doing. I quickly called the doc, who was not on unit, told him what was going on, went back to quickly finish my TPN. Another nurse came in and did my dual sign off, which is important to note. And as I was hanging the bag, this kills me, I out loud said, "Why is the rate so high? I'll have to double check this." I knew I had to double check it, but in the back of my mind, I had to get to that delivery. It was important to get to that delivery now, and I could not leave this child without any fluids because that can cause bigger issues. So I ran it at the rate the label said, which was 10.4 mLs per hour. This baby was, I think, 1.3-ish kilos. I've not trained as a transport nurse yet, but once you do, you learn IV rates based on weight. But those numbers they don't come to me easily. I have to look every time when I do have to do some sort of bolus because I don't do transport yet. So hopefully soon this kind of thing would be more easily recalled for me. I knew it was off though. That much I knew. But there had been changes that day. And when I think back on it in hindsight, I should have just run it at what the D10 was running, which was 4 mLs an hour. But I didn't because I had to get to this delivery. And I was looking at the pharmacy label, which should be printed from the orders. So anyway, I hung it. I went to the delivery, which ended up being a term kid that needed to be intubated, unsedated. I got back to the unit, sat down, my adrenaline was leaving me, and I went, crap, I have to check that order. Sure enough, the rate was supposed to be 3.7. I quickly ran into the room, changed the rate, and looked at the bag again. It had scanned. Why did it scan? Why and how did this happen? There was a dual sign-off. Why and how did this happen? I admit I hadn't properly done my checks because I got interrupted in the middle of my process for this high-risk delivery. That piece is my fault. I take full ownership of that. However, when I looked at the bag closer, there were two labels. One label was big. These are just 250 ml bags. Big label, and right across the middle in bold letters was the rate of 10.4. Vertically, there was a second label, and in tiny regular print, not bold at all, was the rate it was supposed to be at 3.7. So I grabbed the charge nurse, we worked through it. I called pharmacy to see what happened. It turns out that the machine that does the TPN mixtures does not print labels like it does the regular TPN. This was vanilla TPN, and it also doesn't print it for heparin bag mixtures. That's done by the tech afterwards. So the tech should have placed their label over the bold machine printed label. I still totally take ownership of my part in it. I was the last defense and failed. What I ended up doing was putting a safety event in, and hopefully the process will change. Both pharmacy and our staff were notified. But I was mortified that I had made such a ridiculous error, and especially at the start of my shift. So when I think back, how did this happen personally? How did this happen? Well, I was exhausted. I had worked Monday night into Tuesday morning. I had education from 8 a.m. to 2 p.m. on Tuesday, so I didn't sleep. Got home, slept for 2 hours, went and got my kids because my husband was out of town for the 3 days that I needed him to be there. Slept Tuesday night, had to work Wednesday morning, worked all day, got home, got my kids to bed because my husband still wasn't home. It was 9:30 when I sat down to eat, went to sleep, and then I worked Thursday night. This happened on Thursday night. So long story short, I was exhausted. It doesn't excuse it by any means. But my personal life became why I made an error. The charge nurse told me, don't worry about it. The kid basically got a bolus. I caught it, and that was the important part. And she's right. That is the important part. People told me about their near misses or their misses on med errors, and what I found was that they're pretty prevalent. It felt good to know that I am human. It's okay to be human. And sometimes my personal life will affect me just like it did when I worked an office job. But then it made me wonder if nurses are expected to be married to the work. We are human and want human experiences like anyone else, but being a nurse doesn't put me above that. So how can we rectify nurses being overworked? How can we rectify nurses being understaffed? What kind of processes can we put in place to chase that zero? Fortunately, our hospital is very kind to us with errors. We put in the safety event and we're actually commended on admitting mistakes. We get recognized for it. Then the nurse that puts the safety event in is active in making some changes. Our manager is also very kind. I think it helps to work on a unit that deals with babies and families. They understand that the balance is hard, and our manager is kind enough to help us work through that so that we can get to the point of some of the seasoned nurses that do it so well or seem to do it so well. At least they hide it better than I can. Or their kids are growing, which probably helps a lot too. Anyway, ultimately the point is that nurses have the influence and we need to use it.